The morning they sent Reyes home, nobody said anything worth remembering. That's the, to be fair, part that stayed with me. No argument, no dramatic send-off at the gate, just paperwork, a duffel bag, and the particular silence of 15 men who've decided something without deciding it out loud. Sergeant Calloway handed her the transfer orders, and Reyes folded them into her chest pocket like a receipt she didn't need, but was keeping anyway. And I was on the far end of the motor pool pretending to check tire pressure when it happened. I wasn't checking anything, which her name was Corporal Diana Reyes, and she'd been with 3rd Platoon for 11 months before the incident with Lieutenant Marsh's report. I won't get into the details of the report. That's not my story to tell, and it's not the point. But the gist was this. She'd flagged an intelligence discrepancy that Marsh hadn't wanted flagged. And in the Army, the person who creates the paperwork problem is always the problem, so they transferred her out. Forward, I think, operating base. Kieran sat in the Kunar province like something a bored god had dropped and walked away from, a rectangle of HESCO barriers, concertina wire, and sand that found its way into places sand had no business being. You ate sand. You breathed sand. After 3 months, you stopped noticing, in which was how you knew it had already gotten inside you in ways that wouldn't shake loose stateside. 3rd Platoon was 12 men, 14 with Reyes, and then, after the transfer, 12 again. We were supposed to feel right about that number. I guess I didn't. Her last morning kind of on base, I found her at the comms shed at 0430, running the same radio frequency check she'd run every morning for 11 months. Nobody had asked her to. She was done. Plus, processing paperwork cleared. Well, a helicopter extraction at 800. She had her headset on and her notebook open, and she was doing the job anyway. "You don't have to do that," I said. She didn't look up. "I know." She had this way of making you feel like you'd said something obvious that she'd already forgiven you for. I'd gotten that feeling from her maybe 200 times over 11 months, and I still hadn't figured out if it was intentional. "The coast corridor's been pinging weird since Tuesday," she said. "Yes, somebody should log it before the weather window closes tonight." "I'll tell Alvarez. Tell him it's the 3rd frequency in the sweep, not the 1st. He always, starts at the 1st. I said-eyed. She closed her notebook, pulled the headset off, set it on the table like she was putting something to rest. "Take care of Dominguez," she said. "He doesn't eat, in my opinion. When he's scared, and he's always scared, and he just doesn't look it." She picked up her duffel and walked out. And that was that. The helicopter came at 0800 like it was supposed to. By 0815, she sort of was gone, and Sergeant Calloway was running PT and telling us to get our heads straight because we had a patrol in the Chapile corridor in 6 hours, and standing around looking at the sky wasn't getting our heads straight. I ran the PT. I tried not to think about what she'd said about the coast corridor. I failed at the second thing. The patrol brief was at 1100. 2 vehicles, 6 men, so a 12-click route into the Chapile corridor to do a presence patrol and link up with a village elder who'd been passing along information about supply movement in the northern hills. Standard stuff. We'd done this route 4 times in the past 2 months. Calloway ran the brief. Alvarez was on comms, Martinez on kind of the .50 caliber, Dominguez driving the second truck, which I noticed and thought about and said nothing about because nobody asked me, and I wasn't Reyes. But she would have said something. She would have looked at Dominguez's jaw, that tight wire along the hinge of it that showed up when he was working too hard to look calm. And she would have said, "Put somebody else in. That seat, Sergeant," and Calloway would have hated her for it and done it anyway, because she had that particular gift of being right at exactly the volume that was impossible to ignore. But she was on a helicopter headed to Bagram. So Dominguez drove. We rolled out at 1300 under a sky the color of old concrete. The Chapile corridor was about 8 clicks of dirt road flanked on both sides by terraced hillside, switchback goat trails, and the kind of quiet that in another country would mean peace, and out here just meant you couldn't see what was watching you yet. The road was dry, and the wind off the hills had that particular cold knife quality that December in Kunar specializes in. The kind that goes through your jacket and tells you personal things about your bones. Alvarez was on the radio, running his frequency checks. He was starting at frequency 1. I almost said something, almost pulled out my notebook. She said frequency 3, man. She said it namely. But I didn't, because I was, to be fair, in the gun truck and we were already rolling. And Alvarez had been running comms for 2 years, and who was I to tell him Reyes had left instructions? The first 6 clicks weren't thing. That nothing had a weight to it, though. A texture. The kind you get when a place is too empty, when the usual scatter of kids near the road or goat herds on the terraces is just absent. Like something had cleared the stage before we arrived. Calloway didn't call it. I noticed it. And I noted it in my personal log and kept my eyes on the ridgeline and told myself I was being paranoid and that paranoia and pattern recognition are cousins, and I couldn't always tell them apart. And that was fine. That was the job. You noted things and kept moving. We were 400 meters from the Elders' compound when Dominguez's truck stopped. Not a controlled stop. Plus the kind where something mechanical gives out from underneath a vehicle and the vehicle just quits. She like a man who's been walking on a broken ankle for 6 hours, finally sitting down. The rear axle. Gone. Just gone. Calloway's voice on. The radio was flat and practical. Dominguez, report. Dominguez's voice came back high and clipped. Axle failure, Sergeant. We're stopped, which we're... A pause that lasted 1 second too long. We're stopped. That pause. I've run it back in my head maybe 400 times since 1 second. And the space between we're stopped and what came after. In that second, Dominguez was doing the same arithmetic the rest of us were doing. Disabled vehicle, open road, hillsides, on both sides, absent locals, and arriving at the same answer. We'd been too loud getting here, and something had been listening. Plus, the first shot came from the northern ridgeline. Martinez took it in the shoulder. Not fatal, not even close. Oh, but enough to pull him off the .50 caliber and enough to change the math of the next 30 seconds in about 11 different ways. I heard him go down before I saw it. That wet grunt that means something has entered a body that shouldn't be there, and then I was moving on a kind of autopilot that training installs so deep you stop thinking and just become the thing you practiced being. Calloway. Contact north. Vehicles stay tight. Alvarez, get me fire support. Get me someone. Alvarez. I'm working the radio. Sergeant, I'm not getting the frequencies. Switch frequencies, Alvarez. Switch them. Frequency 1 was dead. I don't know how I knew to say it. I just did. It came out of my mouth before I'd decided to say it, Reyes's voice inside my skull doing the work my brain hadn't caught up to yet. Like, 3, I called out. Alvarez, honestly, 3rd frequency in the sweep. Reyes said, she said it this morning. 3rd frequency. A beat. 2 beats. Alvarez's hands moved. And the contact on the northern ridge was 8, maybe 10 shooters working from step-up D positions across a front of about 300 meters. Not a massive force, but they had the altitude and they had the initiative, and we had a disabled vehicle with a man already down and a radio that hadn't been working until 10 seconds ago. While Alvarez worked the comms, the rest of us worked the math of staying alive. Calloway moved like he was built for exactly this. No wasted steps, no hesitation, and his voice hitting each of us in sequence like he was dealing cards. You and you. Move Martinez behind the disabled truck. That's your cover. You, north face, of the embankment. Suppressive. Buy us 90 seconds. You, actually, he pointed at me, which, get me eyes on the second ridge line. South. Tell me what's there. South ridge line. The one nobody was looking at because everyone was looking north. And I belly crawled the 20 meters to the edge of the road embankment and got my binos up and looked south, and what I saw made my stomach do something complicated. Nothing. Clean ridgeline. Empty terracing. No movement. Which meant either we were safe on the south side, or whatever was on the south side was better at being still than we were at looking. Basically, I keyed my radio. Callaway. South Ridge looks clear, but I don't trust it. Say again? I don't trust the clear. A sergeant. A pause. Under fire, a pause costs something. He was spending his and maintain eyes south. You like see anything? I know, Sergeant. Alvarez got through on frequency 3. The whole story of what happened in the next 40 minutes is really the story of those 6 words. Alvarez got through on frequency 3. Because once he got through, everything else that followed, the air support, the quick reaction force, the extraction, all of it had a path. Without that frequency, or we're a disabled vehicle and a comms dark patrol in the Chapayal corridor, and the narrative possibilities narrow down to something I don't want to write about. But Reyes knew. Plus, she knew Tuesday that the first frequency was dirty. She logged it in a notebook she wasn't required to keep for a unit that had already told her she was done. She told me at 0430 in a comms shed because she was constitutionally incapable of leaving a thing wrong even when the thing no longer belonged to her. And the QRF was 19 minutes out. 19 minutes is a long time when people are shooting at you. I know this in my body in a way I can't transfer to words, the way time dilates under fire. Becomes thick. Strange. Each minute subdivided into 100 tiny calculations, each calculation bleeding into the next. You stop experiencing time as duration and start experiencing it as texture. This minute is rough. This minute is smooth. This one has an edge to it, and Martinez was stable. Now Dominguez had TBH, gotten him behind the truck and was applying pressure and talking to him in low, steady Spanish. Not comforting words, just a running account of what his hands were doing, like narrating the work kept both of them grounded. Okay, I'm pressing here, I'm holding this, I'm keeping the pressure, you're good, stay with me. It worked, which Martinez stayed with him. 12 minutes in, I saw movement on the South Ridge. One shape, then 2. Then working down through the terracing with the particular deliberate care of people who know exactly where the observers are and have been patient enough to wait until the observers stopped looking. I called it, Callaway, South Ridge, 2 movers moving to flank. Confirmed south. All elements, we've south contact incoming, redistribute. The way he said it was calm in the way that water is calm right before the current changes. A surface thing, a managed thing. The underneath it was the sound of a man running the numbers and finding them close enough to bad that he needed everyone to be better than they'd been. We redistributed. The 2 movers on the South Ridge were the forward element of a flanking push. 4 more behind them trying to close the distance while the northern contact held our attention. Classic. Elementary even. And the kind of thing you study in a training room and feel clever for recognizing and then encounter in an actual dirt road in Kunar province and feel like a student again. But we'd seen them early enough. Barely. But early enough, I guess, which the QRF arrived at minute 17. Not 19? 17. Because the patrol leader pushed his vehicles and because the frequency got through clean and the grid coordinates were exact, because Alvarez is good at his job, and because Reyes had left her notebook behind. The contact on the North Ridge dissolved fast once the QRF vehicles came up the road. Not a fighting force making a stand, an opportunist force calculating odds, and the odds shifted when reinforcements arrived, so they left. The south flank pulled back 30 seconds later, and the whole engagement, 17 minutes. Martinez. 1 through and through, right shoulder, no arterial involvement, airlifted to Bagram, out of theater but alive. Everyone else, present. Disabled vehicle, eventually recovered. In the after-action report, Callaway cited 3 things that changed. The outcome, the frequency switch, the early call on the South Ridge, and Dominguez keeping Martinez stable, under fire. He didn't mention Reyes. I noticed that. and that night I sat outside the comm shed with a cup of coffee. That had gone cold 20 minutes before and thought about the notebook she'd left on the table. We still had it. Alvarez had picked it up after everything, brought it back to the FOB, left it on the shelf above the radio equipment like it was a piece of gear that needed to go back where it belonged. Her handwriting was small and tilted slightly left, like she was always in a hurry to get to the next thing. I didn't open it. I just knew well it was there, which nobody talked about it directly. You know, that's standard. That's not avoidance. That's just how men who've been through something tend to process it, which is to say they process it sideways, through actions, through small behavioral shifts that say the thing without saying it. Alvarez started running his frequency sweeps from 3. Dominguez started eating breakfast again. Calloway started double-checking vehicle maintenance logs before every patrol. Personally, with a flashlight. The way he hadn't since his first deployment years ago when he was still new enough to be afraid of the things that were worth being afraid of. None of them said her name. I sent her a message through official channels, the only way we had to reach personnel who'd been transferred. It was a 6-line message, formal in structure because that's what the channel required, and what it said in those 6 formal lines was essentially this. The frequency thing mattered. If Martinez is alive, you should know. Plus, I don't know if she got it. Military messaging is its own ecosystem of delays and routing failures and inboxes that nobody checks, and Reyes had been moved to a forward support battalion in Bagram, and then, rumor said, to a different assignment entirely, somewhere the details of which hadn't filtered back to us through the informal channels that carry everything the official ones don't. She might have read it 3 days later. She might have read it 3 months later. She might not have read it at all. What I kept, I guess, coming back to, in the nights after the contact, in the particular awake at 0300 arithmetic. That combat does to your sleep cycle was the specific geometry of what she'd done. She'd been removed, told she was done, told implicitly that her judgment wasn't trusted, that the problem she'd identified was itself the problem. She had every reason, every social, institutional, practical reason to close her notebook, put down her headset, let whatever came next come without her fingerprints on it. Well, she didn't. She ran the check anyway, which she told me about the frequency anyway. Not as a power move, not as a look what happens without me. Just as a woman who couldn't locate within herself the part of a person that lets things be wrong when she knows how to make them right. I've met people like that maybe 4 times in my life. Well, they're exhausting, and they're indispensable. They are very reliably the ones who get transferred. 6 weeks after sort of the Chapayal contact, Sergeant Calloway put in a formal commendation request for Reyes, retroactive, citing her intelligence work and specifically the comms notation that he described as instrumental in maintaining communication capability during a contested engagement. Instrumental. That was the word he chose. I was there when he wrote it. And he sat at the desk in the TOC for 40 minutes working on the language, which wasn't like him. Calloway wrote AAR reports the way he did everything else, fast and efficient and moving to the next thing. But this one he was careful with. He wrote critical and crossed it out. Plus, he wrote essential and crossed it out. He landed on instrumental and stared at it for a while and then submitted the form. I don't know what he was trying to say with that word. I think he was trying to say, we were wrong about her. In bureaucratic language, instrumental is about as close as you get. The commendation went through the standard review process, which in the Army means it moved through approximately 11 layers of administration with the urgency of a slow tide, and I don't know what came of it. I rotated out before I found out. Everyone does eventually, in my opinion. You come home, you decompress. You try to relearn the texture of days that don't require the kind of attention that Kunar required. And some of it comes back and some of it doesn't, and you stop asking which is which. I think about her notebook sometimes, that small left-tilted handwriting. The third frequency in the sweep, not the first. The specific shape of a person who does the work even after the work has been taken from her. I've been home, basically, 2 years now. I work at a hardware store in Columbus, Ohio. I wake up some mornings at 400, and there's no good reason for it. And I make coffee, and I sit with it, and I think about the geometry of that deployment. Who was there? What we did? What we almost didn't do? What we got right and what we got wrong. I think about Martinez coming home to his wife and his kids in San Antonio. I think about the specific mathematics of that. Martinez is alive. 2 words. The weight of them isn't 2 words' weight. I think about Reyes at 0430 in the comms shed. I'd headset on, notebook open, running the check nobody asked her to run. Here's what I never said to her, and what I'll say now because she'll probably never read this, and that makes honesty easier. I didn't understand it when she was there. What she was doing and why. It looked like stubbornness. It looked, if I'm being hard on myself, like the thing that was making her difficult to keep this refusal to stop caring about things people had decided didn't need caring about anymore. And in a unit that ran on hierarchy and consensus, someone who cared about the wrong things at the wrong volume was friction. And we treated her like friction, which she was the load-bearing wall. We found out the way you find out about load-bearing walls, which is by removing one. I don't have a clean ending for this. War stories that end clean are lying to you about something. What I've is this: 12 men in a unit. One of them, the one they sent away, D is the reason one of the 12 is still here. And the 11 who remain, changed in the small behavioral ways that mean something happened, that mean something was understood, carry a name none of them say out loud. They don't have to. That's how I know they remember her.